Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to talk about my most read authors of 2024. So basically, I'm going to go through every author that I read 3 or more things from during the year, and we'll look at like what I read by them, the average rating, and whether I think I should continue to read things by these authors or not. Because I am a completionist, I often fall into the habit of like reading everything by an author, even when I'm not really liking them. So this is like a check-in to see whether I need to stop something. And of course, some of these are authors that I read a lot of because I love them and I want to tell you about them. So let's start at the bottom of the list. We have Jim Butcher, who is really only on here because of a spreadsheet technicality, because I read 3 things by him, but 2 of them were the same thing. And one of them I actually DNF partway through and then had another go at it later. But because of how I kind of managed my spreadsheet, that meant he's on there 3 times. So what I'm talking about is both The Aeronaut's Windlass and The Olympian Affair. So the first and second books from what is the series called? The Cinder Spires. So I had read The Aeronaut's Windlass quite a long time ago when it first came out, and then I reread it in preparation for the sequel coming out. And it's kind of like a steampunk, Victorian, post-apocalyptic story where humanity are now living in these spires, and they use like airships to go from one spire to the other, and there's a lot of inter-spire politics. All that part of the story I don't really like, but what I do like is the cats. There is kind of a whole underground society of talking cats, and I love everything with the cats in it. As well, we have these people who use magic, and they're all so mentally unstable as a result of it. And I love the way that the magic works, and that these people who do magic, I love the way that they kind of act so bizarrely. So I did enjoy my reread of The Aeronaut's Windlass. And then The Olympian Affair, I think I started reading it physically and I was struggling with getting through it. So I ended up kind of putting it aside until I could get the audiobook. And the audiobook, I still found like there's a lot that's going on with the plot, and just I don't tend to like that kind of Victorian humor that comes with a lot of steampunk books, and just like the whole bravado. I don't know. There's a lot I don't like about it. So I had to really push through some bits, but I did still really like the cats and the magic users. So I'm glad I pushed through it for that, but also it wasn't my favorite. So I think on my soft DNF of The Olympian Affair, initially I gave it 2 stars, and then I rounded it up to 2.5 once I finished the whole audiobook. But overall, that means Jim Butcher came up with an average rating of 2.67, which is pretty low. And because of that, I think I want to say that I won't pick up any more Jim Butcher, but I also know when another book comes out from the Cinder Spires, I'm going to feel tempted because of the cats and because of the magic. I'm also still flirting with the idea of going back to the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I feel like all of that is a terrible idea. I probably shouldn't. If you see me doing either of those things, tell me I'm making a mistake, because I think it would be a mistake for me. Okay, then we have Kate Elliott, who I also read 3 things by, and all of those were from a single series as well, and it was books 2, 3, and 4 of the Jaren series. So a long time ago, when I was in my early 20s, I think, maybe my late teens, I had picked up one of the Jaren books. I actually don't know which one it was anymore, because my memory of what happened in it didn't actually line up with any of these books properly when I was rereading them. But basically, I never had the opportunity to continue the series when I was younger, even though I really liked what I remembered, even though that was wrong. So I decided to just like read this whole series as like a gift to pass me, I guess just to fulfill my curiosity about what was actually going on in this series. Because what I remembered about it is that it was this woman who'd ended up on this planet with this like nomadic tribe of people, kind of like pre-technology, but she was actually from a spaceship, and like I remembered it was her father, it was actually her brother, had turned up in a spaceship and was like trying to convince her that she had to come home. So that is what's happening, but there's also a lot more kind of going on about the politics with this like alien species and the humans and this nomadic tribe. There's definitely a lot of like cultural analysis in this series that I really liked, but there's also a lot of like kind of romance stuff, and the relationships are kind of toxic and not really to my preference. And so I found those bits incredibly frustrating. And the series just in general like expands and wanders and goes all over the place. And it's kind of interesting, but also kind of rambly and frustrating at times. So I think I gave the books 3 stars, 3 stars, and then the last one 2.5 stars, because what was that? A very unsatisfying ending. So I don't know. I do still want to pick up some more Kate Elliott, but so far everything I've read by Kate Elliott has been the Jaren series and also her Crown of Stars series. I'm pointing up because it's right on the top of my bookshelf. Ready to fall on my head at any point if there was an earthquake. And those are fat books, so maybe I'll die. Anyway, I did like the Crown of Stars series, even though it had its ups and downs. It's a very long series. I did like that, and I think it's not really Kate Elliott's fault that I didn't like the Jaren books, because I should never have thought that I would like that. So I am actually still interested in picking up something newer by Kate Elliott, because it's been so long since these books were published. Like, the Jaren books were like early 90s? Is that like 30 years? It's a long time. So I expect she's come somewhere, changed her writing style to some degree, and I have always liked her ideas and her cultural analysis, so I'd like to pick up something newer by her, and maybe I will do that soon. She does have a new release this year, so maybe that's the one. Next, also with 3 books, we have Olivia Blake. So let's talk about them in the order that I read them, which is also consequently the order that I rated them from lowest to highest. So we start with The Atlas Complex, which is the last book in the Atlas series that started with the Atlas 6. So basically about these young people joining this magical society, but it turns out they have to kill one of them to kind of progress to the next year. And it's a lot of drama, a lot of angst. I didn't like the ending, so I only gave it 2.5 stars, but it was definitely an interesting series. Then, I've just dropped books everywhere. Then there's Masters of Death, which I picked this up because I got this from a little free library, even though it's a very new release, so I was very excited to find it. And this is about, not really what the synopsis says, kind of about this real estate agent who's trying to sell a haunted house, but her and the ghost have to work with this medium who also turns out to be the godson of death and have this weird affair with this other, like, Norse god. And it's a lot of angst and drama again, which I didn't really enjoy, but I kind of liked the weirdness of this. Like, there were parts of this that I loved and parts of it where I was like, what? So kind of conflicted about this. Then lastly, I read Masters of Death, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. This is like a Romeo and Juliet retelling, kind of, except the families are magical families, and I really enjoyed the romance between one of the daughters and one of the sons, and just a lot of the ideas and interactions between the characters were really great. So I've always said with Olivia Blake, I do have some problems with her writing, and I think just the way she structures things a little bit, but I really enjoy her characters and her ideas. So I probably will continue reading things by Olivia Blake, even though the average rating here is only 3, which is not that high. It's kind of like things can be either a hit or a miss, and probably mostly just in between. But I still have a lot of hope with Olivia Blake, and even when I don't like her things, I still enjoy hearing her talk about the ideas. So for that reason, they're worth reading to me. Okay, then I read the first 3 books of Lightfall by Tim Probert. I only have books 1 and 2 here, but also book 3 was released, I think, just in 2024. And I had read books 1 and 2 previously, so I reread them to read book 3. And these are kind of like, I always say Dark Crystal-esque. We're following this young girl whose adopted grandfather is this pig wizard, and he goes off, gets a bit lost, and she and this other random guy she meets up with, this Galdurian, who is the last of his kind, they go off to find this uncle and end up kind of in this bigger, epic adventure. The art in this series especially is really like nicely done, but there are also these like scary bird guys, which I think is what gives me that Dark Crystal feeling. So I rated these all pretty highly. I think I gave the first one 4.5 and then the other 2 4 stars. And I'm really looking forward to the series continuing, so I will definitely read more. Then another really cutesy graphic novel series that's come on here is Bug Boys by Laura Knetzer. So I read all 3 Bug Boys volumes. I think that's all there's going to be, but if there was ever more, I would definitely read it, and I would definitely be interested in anything else Laura Knetzer did. I don't know if I've actually looked up what else she has done. The other things that are floating around by her, by the looks of it, are all things that are like a little bit older and a little bit lower rated, so maybe I'll hold out for new stuff by her. But basically the Bug Boys is these two cute bugs, Stag Bee and Rhino Bee, and they just have a really great friendship and go on a bunch of like buggy adventures, mostly really wholesome, sometimes really weird. I love the humor, I love all their friends, it's a great time. Okay, then the last author that I just read 3 things by is Robin Hobb. So this is definitely a change for me in terms of Robin Hobb. I'm sure previous years I would have read way more because I was still reading The Realm of the Elderlings, which I have a whole shelf of here, and I really loved. And because I had finished The Realm of the Elderlings and I needed more Robin Hobb, I picked up the Soldier Sun trilogy. Now this has a much lower average rating than any of the books in The Realm of the Elderlings. However, I decided I don't care, I need more Robin Hobb, and I'm really glad because I love the Soldier Sun trilogy. Like, I gave the books 5 stars, 4.5 stars, and 4.5 stars. Like, I enjoyed the journey of these books so much and everything that they had to say and just like the traumatic experiences inside them. And I honestly don't think they're that different from a lot of the Realm of the Elderlings books. So I'm kind of confused about why they are much lower rated, but perhaps people just don't like the way certain themes are dealt with, but I kind of did like the way they were dealt with. So what is this series even about? We're following this young boy named Navarre, and he is the soldier son of a soldier son. So basically in this world, every second son will become a soldier, and his father was also a soldier, although he's now been raised up to be a noble. So there's a lot of expectations on Navarre, and he really wants to do a great job. However, his people are basically the colonizers of this alternate colonial America, and the native people of this land have like these magical abilities, and Navarre ends up kind of like wrapped up in the conflict between the different people as well as what this magic wants him to do. I really liked how different this magic is in that it's not really one that you learn to control. It's more of a magic that controls you. I really like this series. It's one of my favorites. And like the question of will I read more Robin Hobb is not even a question that we need to ask. Like, of course I will. Give me everything I can find. Then the next lot of books is also all part of a series, and I've said it's 4 books by the same author. It's kind of debatable because this is The Cursed Princess Club by Lamb Cat. So there were, when I read this, 4 volumes that had been released because these were originally like webtoon comics, but then they were being released as books, and I just kind of marked those 4 books as like stand-ins for me actually reading the whole series on webtoon. But I think the 5th book has been released now, and I don't actually know how many books the series is going to be in total. I would love to reread it in the book form though, because I think there's like slight changes being made as it's being released as books. Anyway, this is a story about the 3 pastel princesses who are betrothed to the 3 plaid princes. Sounds really silly, but while the first 2 princesses are kind of classically beautiful princesses, the 3rd one has like green skin and green hair and pointy teeth, and when the youngest prince discovers that he is betrothed to her, he's like, oh, but she's ugly. And when she hears that, she gets very upset, runs into the forest and meets up with this cursed princess club where there's a whole bunch of princesses with curses that they haven't been able to cure. And then the series just goes so much further than you would think it would. It's so funny, but also wholesome and full of great lessons, and also does like a really great job of like pulling the whole plot together at the end. Like, it starts out with such a silly setup, but it's also a book series that I recommend to everyone. Like, I don't even care if you think it doesn't sound like something you would like. You should still try it, because I think if the sense of humor is something you can enjoy, then you'll end up loving it. It's worth a try, right? And I would love to read more things by Lamb Cat, but I think at the moment they're still really busy converting the webtoon to books. But maybe one day? Okay, next we have Joe Abercrombie. So I read 5 things by Joe Abercrombie in 2024, and I actually know he featured on this list in 2023 as well. In 2023, I read 5 things by him as well, because basically I read the first half of the First Law World in 2023 and the second half in 2024. However, the average rating in 2023 for Joe Abercrombie was 4.3, but for 2024, it was only 3.5. So I think that shows my opinion of how the First Law World went. I definitely still enjoyed some books at the end of the First Law World, like the Age of Madness trilogy. I still enjoyed it, but not to the same level as the beginning of the First Law World books, or like that First Law trilogy. And this is confirmation of that, right? So in 2024, I read the last 2 standalones. Red Country, which is the westerny kind of one, which I personally found it just really hard to pay attention to. Also Sharp Ends, which was like a short story anthology where the stories were fine, but nothing particularly memorable. And then the Age of Madness trilogy, which I liked. So this is like a grimdark series following kind of these different people in these kingdoms that are at war with each other, and there's kind of like this bigger underlying magical plot as well, although not much ever happens with that. It's just kind of simmering away, and actually nothing much happens. It's not really true. Things definitely happen, but in the end it's always kind of just unsatisfying. But it is a good journey. I really like Joe Abercrombie's writing, and I really love the way he develops characters. And I'm definitely going to continue things by Joe Abercrombie, but I'm glad that this year he's writing something in a new world, because I do think that I, at least, was getting a bit bored of what he was doing with the First Law world. And I think maybe both him and I will enjoy him writing something better in a new world. So I'm excited that that's what's actually happening. Then with 7 books, we have Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. So basically I reread the whole 6 volumes of the Lock and Key series, and then I also read like a bind up of a bunch of like short stories in that world. And I love the original Lock and Key series. So I think I rated most of those either 4 or 4.5 stars. It's basically about this family who has a legacy of having these magical keys. So the original series follows these children. Something very traumatic happens, and so their family moves to their father's old family home where they start finding all these magical keys. But there's also kind of people who would like to use those keys for other less wholesome reasons. And then the bind up of other stories I read is the Golden Age, which is set kind of more around World War, I want to say World War One, but I'm not confident. Anyway, it's set more like in historical times, and it's how this family is using the keys back then, when they knew a little bit more about the keys actually back then, including how to make new keys. So I enjoyed it, but I think I overall only gave it 3 stars, probably just because there was that focus on the war, and I don't really like reading about war, especially real wars. Like maybe fictional wars I can allow if there's some good reasons for it, but like wars in real life almost never had good reasons. Anyway, will I read more by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez? Yes. If they do more Lock and Key stuff, I'll probably read it, because it's a series I've really loved, and I love more magical keys. Although there are a lot of other things by both of them separately that I haven't read. And even though I love the Lock and Key series, I'm just still not convinced that I want to try anything else by either of them. And I couldn't really tell you why, but I think I have looked into them and I haven't seen anything where the content actually called to me. If you know anything by either Joe Hill or Gabriel Rodriguez that you recommend, let me know. I do think it's interesting, like the average rating for Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez is 4.07, and I'm like, don't know if I'll read any more by them. But then other authors who, like Olivia Blake, who the average rating is 3 stars, I'm like, yeah, I'll read more by her. I'm questioning my logic. Or maybe I should be questioning the validity of my ratings? I don't know. Anyway, next we have Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. So basically I reread the whole Monstrous series in preparation for reading volume 8. Yes, volume 8. The latest volume in Monstrous. No, that's not true. There is volume 9 now, but I haven't got into that yet because it's hard for me to get my hands on it. I love the Monstrous series. I will admit volume 8 was not my favorite, but I will definitely continue the series because I do love it. I have also been reading The Night Eaters, which is also by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I read volume 2? 3? 2. Wait. I read volume 2 in 2024, and I think volume 3 is coming out in 2025, so I will definitely be reading that if I can get my hands on it. It's a little bit hard to get through the library, and graphic novels are a little bit expensive for me to justify at the moment, but I will definitely try my hardest to get my hands on it, because this is like a series. It's hard to talk about what it's about, but it's very dark and twisted, and kind of these parents like bringing their children into like a darker, creepier world that is kind of going on behind the scenes. I don't like it quite as much as Monstrous, but I'm still definitely enjoying it. So definitely I will continue with them. Okay, next we have Alona Andrews, and I read 9 things by them. So Alona Andrews is like a husband and wife writing duo, and they wrote the Kate Daniels series, which is right behind me. I really love that series, and I have been trying to read more of their stuff this year. So I read the whole of the Innkeeper Chronicles, and I rated most of those 4 or 4.5 stars. They're a lot of fun, kind of like supernatural creatures in space, or more that it turns out that all the supernatural creatures of the world are actually aliens, and our main characters are like people who run the inns that these aliens stay at. I really enjoyed that series, and it's not finished, so I'm looking forward to whenever we get more books in that series. And then as well, I started the Edge novels. This is kind of a slightly older series by Alona Andrews about people who live in kind of this dimension in between our world and a more magical world. So they live on the edge, hence why it's called the Edge novels. I read the first 2 books of those. They're a little bit more paranormal romance than is my taste, but I still really love Alona Andrews' writing and their character development and their magic systems. Like, still had a really great time with them. And I'm continuing that series this year. I also read Sanctuary, which is a short story kind of set in the Kate Daniels world that they released. And the question of whether I will continue to read Alona Andrews is a ridiculous question, because they're one of my most favorite authors, and I will read everything they release, ever. I can't see that ever changing. Okay, then an author I read 10 things by is Martha Wells. So I read all of the Murderbot series, including a couple of short stories in that world. And then I also read Witch King. Witch King I only gave 2.5 stars, but I am actually going to read the sequel that's coming out this year, because I feel like even though I had problems with Witch King, it had a lot of potential in the world. It's kind of about this demon, and he wakes up to discover that he's no longer in the body that he was in, and he's trying to find out what happened to his previous body, and he suspects betrayal. Very different in tone and just in everything compared to Murderbot, which is about this security bot who's hacked their systems so they can watch TV and kind of unfortunately still has to do their job and interact with humans. Ugh. So I love Murderbot, and there's meant to be more Murderbot books coming out at some point as well, so I'm holding my breath for that. So again, like, will I read more Martha Wells? Definitely. Although with Queen Demon, the sequel to Witch King, if that doesn't live up to my expectations, then maybe I'll just stick to Murderbot in the future. Okay, then we have another author that I read 10 things by, and I think the average rating was 2.8. So I probably won't be continuing to read anything by them. And that is Kaio Shirai and Pozuka Demizu. So these are the creators of The Promised Neverland. So I think I read volumes 6 to 15 in 2024. I was kind of determined to finish the series off, but it's a 20-volume series. And when I got to book 15, I thought, there is not going to be an ending to the series that is going to satisfy me, so I should just cut my losses and not keep going, even though I hadn't really enjoyed like the last 5 at least volumes of that series. The setup was really interesting. It was like these orphans at this orphanage and everything seems really nice, but they find out that there's kind of like a big secret going on that means it's not nice at all. It kind of turns into a bit of a horror, and I really liked the beginning when these orphans were kind of trying to work out what's going on around them and work out what they were going to do about it. And then I was very excited to learn more about the world outside the orphanage. But after that, I didn't really like a lot of the direction the plot went in, unfortunately. So I probably won't pick up anything else by them. Okay, then I have one more author that I read 10 things by, and then we get to the author I read the most things by. Can you guess the author I read the most things by? If you've watched a lot of my videos this year, you might be able to guess. But anyway, the one that I read 10 things by was Dustin Nguyen and Jeff Lemire. So I read 10 things by them, and they were all rereads. Basically, I reread the Descender series. So these books here, which are all about these giant robots turn up and basically kill off a bunch of humans. And then in retaliation, the humans start killing the robots, and there's a big long-standing conflict. Every time I hold up these really white books, my lighting goes a bit crazy trying to like adjust for it. I should have held up the black one. Anyway, mainly we're following this young companion robot, Tim 21, as he tries to find out what's happened to his family and finds himself in the middle of this conflict between the humans and the robots. Then as well, I read the 4 volumes of Ascender, which kind of continues on from the story of Descender, but also has a bit of a magical component. And I mean, I already knew I love these, that's why I reread them. And I was very excited to get these editions actually from the local secondhand shop for quite cheap, which is the only reason I own them, because as I said, graphic novels are very expensive normally, but I got these ones secondhand, yay me. Who knows if I'll ever get to own the rest of the series, but anyway, I love it. So my average rating for Jeff Lemire and Justin Nguyen is 4.45, which I think is the highest on the list, but it's kind of cheating because it was a reread and I knew that was going to happen. So then, the author that I read the most things by in 2024 is actually the author I read the most things by in 2023, and that's because I was doing a big Cosmere reread and then continuing on with the Cosmere books I hadn't read. So I think that gives it away that it is Brandon Sanderson. I read 25 things by him in 2024 because not only was I doing that Cosmere reread, I also read all of the books from the Alcatraz series, Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, and then I also read that book that I dropped on the floor before, hang on, Long Chills and Caisto, which was kind of like a little book we got in the Secret Project boxes right at the end of the year. So that was just a really short little story, and I, to be honest, didn't like this one that much. So Brandon Sanderson's average has come out at 3.6, and I will note that in 2023 it was 3.62. So I was actually going to make the argument that books like this, and maybe even the Alcatraz series, although I actually think some of the Alcatraz books I rated quite highly. Oh, actually, I think I gave all the Alcatraz books 3.5 or 4 stars. So I can see the things I rated the lowest for Brandon Sanderson was The Lost Metal. If you've seen the vlog where I watched that, or my most disappointing books of the year, then you know why I only gave that 1.5 stars. I also reread all of White Sands, which I didn't really like. As I said, I didn't really like this one. And in fact, the whole of Mistborn Era 2 I didn't really like. But pretty much everything else I gave 3.5 stars and above. I gave 5 stars pretty much to the whole of the beginning of the Stormlight Archives, but that was a reread, so I knew I was going to like those. Anyway, I read lots of stuff by Brandon Sanderson. I like some of it a lot. I like some of it not as much. Just thinking, what if I order this spreadsheet by release date? Does it look like it's trending down? I think I'd have to make this into a graph. I'll do it after this, but you look at this graph and tell me, do you think it's trending down? I'm a little bit worried that it's trending down. But I will continue reading Brandon Sanderson because I do really love some of his stories. I'm a little bit worried that the way he wants to be writing in the future is not to my preference, that it's a little bit too comical. But I guess we'll see when we get some new releases from him. I'm going to be really sad if, after having reread the whole of the Cosmere and like loving some of those books so much, I'm going to be really disappointed if he as an author decides to go in a direction that isn't one that I enjoy. But all we can do is wait and see. Anyway, that is all my most read authors of the year. Let me know if you've read any of those authors and whether you're going to continue reading them or not. Also, let me know who you think is your most read author of the year. I'd love to know. And also, are they an author you want to keep reading, or was it a mistake? Let me know down in the comments. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.